done it, folks. Round of applause. Applause for yourself. You did it. You did great. You look great today, by the way. We're finally over 500 subscribers on the YouTube, halfway to my goal for 2024. But let's go ahead and hop into the plays. So last week we were talking about Symbiotic and earnings. I decided I did not want to hold this stock into earnings. The stock ended up getting crushed on a pretty good earnings though, which created an opportunity in my mind. I ended up loading up some calls, which are playing out very well. Long term, I'm still bullish on this stock. However, we should be aware of also the macro circumstances that we're walking into in the mid-February. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Let's go ahead and take a few victory laps. Snapchat ended up getting clapped on earnings. I thought it would be a concern. We also saw that Pinterest got clapped on earnings as well. Ended up seeing a sell-off here. I thought we also had a gap and go where we kind of gap down and then we were going to sell off further. Instead, the stock ended up having quite a bit of beta and just climbed with the market on Friday. I thought that was really interesting. I'm still in a short position here. I would like to see if we can have a continuation to the downside. We are seeing some signs of that on the technicals here. We are also walking into a period where I think the market will have a pullback in general. So I'm going to continue to hold this position. However, right now it is at a loss. Chegg also had a really poor earnings, but we're seeing dip buyers come in. I'm not really sure what the growth story is or what people who are buying this see. But if this rallies up again back to the $11 mark, I'm going to short it again. And then there's Tesla. We did end up seeing the break that we were looking for on Monday, which gave some quick profits. And then afterwards, I haven't really been playing this. This is recovering. People have been asking me, is it time to go long on Tesla? Should we be buying? I did do some buying right after earnings. Then I took a step back and I stopped feeling the FOMO and I was like, holy cow, wait a second. The technicals here don't look that great. And I have to admit that there has been some improvement, but still our weekly and our daily is not looking that strong on shorter time frames. It still looks choppy. The stock right now sits at a major point of resistance at this 193.50. So I'd be worrisome about that. If you get over the 196, maybe you have a short-term trade back up to 202. That might be appealing. Maybe that'll be a setup that we see this week. But given the fact that I'm kind of weak on the market right now, and I'm kind of leaning a little bit more bearish, looking for some potential pullbacks before massive rallies into the end of the year, I am going to be patient on this one. And I think the patience will pay out well. And now we definitely got to talk about ARM. I was nervous about ARM in the earnings. I thought as a pure valuation, it was probably overpriced. At this point though, ARM has gone from 73 to 115. And look, you can create an argument that, oh, NVIDIA is overbought. Look at this parabolic run. But there's actually rationalizations that you can make for why NVIDIA deserves to have this price it has. One of our analysts in the Discord, back when NVIDIA was back at 500, was saying that, hey, my price target is 666 based on the amount of sales that we're seeing now. Now, I've talked about in the past, we're looking for some of that to normalize in the future, but right now there's all this FOMO for computation for the future of AI, and so people are buying as hand over fist as much as they can for the GPUs. But when we're looking at the actual fundamentals for something like ARM, this cannot be rationalized. This is more overvalued than NVIDIA is right now. This was just, I don't even know what to make of this. I think SMCI makes sense as well. Young company that I think has tons of growth potential. I'm looking for this one to go to 800. I'm still bullish here, but when I look at ARM, I can't put together that same narrative. I can't put together that same thesis. I think that this is just straight up overvalued, and if anything, I'd want to be short here, but I honestly just don't even want to touch it. Now let's take a step back. I want to talk about my trading overall in general, and then I want to cover the macro. For my trading, I have been kind of wildly swinging at lots of different plays. A lot of the time, I started to kill my accuracy. We got down to about a 60% win rate. Usually I hover about 70, maybe 80 when it's really good. Beginning of the year, I was at like a 90% win rate and I was maintaining that really well. And then we kind of chopped down, and I don't like that at all. So right now my goal is to try to shrink the amount of trading I do, take less trades, less can be more. And so I want to be focusing more on clear confirmations and improve my accuracy right now, because this is going to become an issue if I don't nip it in the butt immediately. And now let's talk about the macro. One of the things I'm looking at right now is we are seeing that VIX is starting to pick up in its call buying. Once again, people are stepping in pretty huge, something we saw at the beginning of the year before we had that massive pullback. We are at a pretty key level. SPY broke over 500. On my technicals, I had said that this could potentially run to 504 before we see the short-term pullback that I'm looking for. I'm not technically bearish, but I am looking for a potential pullback that could rapidly turn over. February 14th is going to be your important date here. That's when a lot of these VIX call contracts roll over and create a gap for the market to move to the downside. Now, if we look at SPY, we can see that we've also seen some picking up and put buying all week despite the market melting up. I think it's important to note that our implied volatility percentile got to 1%, which is why this has been such a slow grind to the upside. It looks very frothy, looks very toppy on longer time frames. Everything still looks very bullish, and we need to look at IWM. Hey, if IWM gets over this key level here, if we can get over this 205 on IWM, I think you're going to go for a breakout. You're going to see the breadth improve, and we're going to have a massive rally this year. Everyone's going to get back in trading. That makes me excited for my brand, for what I do. It'll bring a lot of people back to the market. It'll bring a lot of excitement back to the market as well, because we've been through a dead period. And so I'm looking forward to that. But in the short term, I don't want to be blinded by it, okay? So we need to be keeping an eye on how this develops and be cautious. It doesn't mean the market's going to sell off. It just means that there's a period of weakness that I want to be cognizant of. I do want to give a special shout out to XBI as well. We have a similar setup here as with the Russell, but I do think that there's more upside in these biotech names. I am the science geek, and don't you forget it. I will not change. I will always hold these in my long term. We've actually seen some interesting setups on names like CRISPR. I do hold calls here. They are in profits right now. We saw a nice gap up over 70, and I'm looking to see if this actually wants to go ahead and start a rally. Remember, there's going to be some weakness in the market, so we might see this chomp around at these high levels. Although the daily looks really strong, we're starting to break to the upside, and that has me pretty excited because the weekly is also confirming it and looking very strong. And we also have some great catalysts coming up later in the year, so this one's definitely on my radar. I already have positions. Keep in mind, interest rates are coming down, and the cuts that we see are going to affect biotech massively. Okay, these companies have to take on tons of debt to finance all their projects. The easier it is to finance that debt with lower interest rates, the better it is for them. So they're going to be very sensitive to any cuts that the Fed has. And so I'd keep a close eye here. Now let's talk about Invex. This company is garbage. I do not like them. I see a lot of people are getting bullish on Reddit though. And I also had a long discussion on X that you can go read about this company. So people are wanting to feel bullish here. The only thing that caught my eye, though, when I was looking over it, is all this short float. 46% on the short float. This definitely has squeeze potential, and I would keep an eye on this, all right? If we do see a big rally on this stock, do not be surprised if this goes very parabolic, maybe turns into a meme stock, because that's a really high short float. Shorts are getting very greedy here. We also have earnings in late February. Keep that on your radar. Roku kind of makes me hungry because it sounds so much like Roadhouse. Just kind of rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? These are the key levels that I'm looking at for Roku, okay? We see some news from Netflix and Disney becoming more reliant on ads. This creates an environment where Roku can actually snag some of this ad revenue. So I'm looking for some surprises to the upside or some good guidance here. I do hold calls and earnings. I will continue to hold those. I bailed on SYM. I'm going to hold these because I think there's plenty of upside potential here. Mara, I remember when this stock was $6. I bought $10 calls. It went to 12. I felt like a genius, made a bunch of money, and then watched it run all the way to 80. So when I'm looking at this right now, I think it's relatively cheap compared to the price of Bitcoin. First of all, if we do some historical analysis and the correlation we typically see, and I'm also looking at the potential of where the stock could run. They're actually on the path to become profitable this year, which is really cool for them. And I think Bitcoin is also set up to go higher. We see weeklies actually firing back to the upside for Bitcoin. But shockingly, I had to do some panic buying after we didn't see the amount of pullback I was looking for. So we're back in, we're riding the wave, and I think with something like Mara, it's going to be so essential that you are cognizant of your risk management here, okay? Because something like this, you're always going to feel like, oh, I should wait for the dip, and then it's going to go higher and higher. And the premiums and the implied volatility are going to stay persistently high as well. So you kind of had to be fearless when you play something like this, but make sure that you control that risk due to the amount of contracts you buy, the amount of allocation you put into it, okay? Because if it pulls back, even if it just pulls back slightly, the implied volatility can eat 50% of your contracts, okay? So leave some ammo, and if you don't make a killing, but you at least have exposure, call that a win, okay? Just be very careful with names like this because they can eat your wallet if you're not cautious. I think it's worth noting that even some of the inner circle traders are just buying shares on Mara, and that you take a lot of risk out of that. I'm expecting Bitcoin to hit all-time highs. I think you'll make great profits just buying up the shares. So if that's more your style, you don't want to play with this crazy option chain, perfectly viable. And don't forget about all the earnings that we still have this week. There's such big names: Shopify, Datadog, Airbnb, Upstart, Robinhood, Lyft, Instacart. That'll be really interesting. I love digging through Instacart's data, seeing consumer habits when it comes to groceries. Even though groceries have been coming up, we've actually seen Instacart not increase in the amount that people are spending, which means there's definitely some changing in consumer habits, which is something you consider when you think about Yeti, because they have a lot of competition coming in with some cheaper brands. We haven't seen that tip the scales out of their favor. They still maintain their leadership position, but the stock is at a very interesting pivot point. You know, Strangles here might be really interesting in earnings. It's also a good mover, so there might be some potential considering how the options are priced right now. Fastly, Upwork, Twilio, Cisco, Crocs, John Deere, Roku. Of course, we've already talked about that. DoorDash has had a bunch of legality issues. I would be bearish on there. I haven't looked at the chart though. I'll probably do a bunch of write-ups in the Discord. So if you want to know everything I'm thinking in real time, ask me any questions. Always live in the Discord. We'll be live streaming 3 times this week, doing some live training as well. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button if you like the content. Congrats on 500. You guys are awesome. You look sexy today. All right, now go enjoy the Super Bowl or post Super Bowl. Try and sober up because Monday we're back to work, baby.